This little homeland between Egypt, Syria, and Arabia has been the site of major controversy and dispute for a long time, and in order to properly understand what's going on, we need to go back to the beginning. The first humans that lived here were actually some of the oldest fossils we have outside of Africa, found in modern-day northern Israel. Between 10,000 and 9,000 BCE, the first permanently inhabited settlement, Jericho, was founded. It is also around this time in which the region began speaking the Proto-Afroasiatic language, the predecessor to what most Middle Easterners and North Africans speak today. Now, before I move on, I find it important to explain the term ethnogenesis. This is essentially how ethnic groups come to exist. Ethnogenesis occurs over the course of generations when groups of people who enter a region develop shared commonalities such as culture, genetics, language, or religion. This essentially means that ethnicity is determined by human migration. This is a really interesting map made by one of my favorite YouTubers, Masaman, who I highly recommend you go watch if you're interested in demographics. As we can see, every people group has origins somewhere else, and the term indigenous can be quite arbitrary. Now that this concept is understood, the first major people group that would form here would be known as the Proto-Canaanites. They were the result of the Natufian people intermixing with migrants from the Zagros and Caucasus Mountain region. By around 3750 BCE, the Proto-Canaanites became the Canaanites with the birth of the Semitic language, the predecessor to both modern-day Arabic and Hebrew. Over the years, more people groups began to migrate to the region, like the Amorites from Upper Mesopotamia and the Egyptians when they conquered the Canaanites in the 15th century BCE. They would rule over them until the start of the 12th century. Around this time is when we see the first recorded use of the term Israel on the Merneptah slab, which describes Pharaoh Merneptah's campaigns in Canaan. The start of the 12th century also marks the beginning of the Bronze Age collapse. This is notable to us for two reasons: the invasions of the Sea Peoples and the emergence of the 12 tribes of Israel. The biblical narrative says that these Israelites came from nomads who settled the land and were divided into 12 tribes. They were named after each of the 12 sons of Jacob, the grandson of Abraham. However, non-biblical sources suggest that they were not migrants, but developed out of the indigenous Canaanite people. The Sea Peoples, on the other hand, were different groups of migratory people originating in various spots in the Mediterranean. One group of these Sea Peoples were known by the Egyptians as the Peliset, a more Hellenic-based people group who established themselves in approximately the same location as the modern-day Gaza Strip. The term Peliset would eventually be corrupted into the term Philistine, in which we hear about in the Bible in stories like David and Goliath. Keep these terms in mind as they will be important later on. Around 1000 BCE, the 12 tribes united in order to better defend against the Philistines, and the first kingdom of Israel was established. In 853 BCE, King Ahab of Israel would send troops in an alliance of 11 kings to defend against the emerging Assyrian Empire at the Battle of Karkar. Another king who was part of this alliance was King Gindabu of the Kedarites. Who were the Kedarites? Well, they're the people living at the northern fringes of Arab-inhabited lands at the time. The Kirk monoliths that describe this battle address King Gindabu as the Arabian, making it the first mentioning of the Arab people in recorded history. These monoliths also write the alliance of 11 kings as 12 kings, but we'll get to that shortly. Anyway, the Kedarites were a confederation of nomadic tribes named after Kedar, the son of Ishmael and the grandson of Abraham. The Kedarites, and later the Nabateans, who we will talk about, were known as the Ishmaelites. They were part of, get this, the 12 princes of Ishmael who were named after the 12 sons of Ishmael. It is said that the Arabs, including the Prophet Muhammad, are descendants of the Ishmaelites. You can see how much of the religious history can get very complicated. Now, as for all the instances of the number 12, this is likely due to Akkadian tradition of naming things in groups of 12 regardless of the actual number. Anyway, back to the chronology. By 722 BCE, the Assyrians would conquer Israel and deport a significant amount of Jews eastward to Mesopotamia and Iran. Around the year 600 BCE, the Babylonians would invade, destroy the temple in Jerusalem, and deport its population yet again. They would hold on to the land until the conquest of the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great. The Jews had a better experience under the Persians, as many were allowed to return in 539 BCE, although many stayed voluntarily, with King Cyrus encouraging settlement throughout the empire. They were even allowed to rebuild the temple at Jerusalem. But, by 332, Alexander the Great had incorporated this land as part of his empire, and once he died, the empire was divided by numerous Greek kings. two of which notable to us being the Seleucids and the Ptolemies. Israel was first controlled by the Ptolemies, and many Jews went to Egypt as captives, mercenaries, and migrants. When the Seleucids controlled Israel, they were forbidden by King Antiochus IV from practicing their faith. He put up a statue of Zeus and spilled pig blood on the Temple Mount. The Jews revolted in what was known as the Maccabean Revolt and became independent yet again. This would be the last time the Jews had self-rule until the modern era. This self-rule would last until they were conquered by the Romans in 63 BCE. Not too long after the Roman conquest in 30 AD, Jesus Christ was crucified, leading to the rise of Christianity as a new religion. It is around this time that the Nabateans, another of the Ishmaelite tribes, emerge out of the decline of the Kedarites. They occupied the southern portion of the land, including Gaza, using the city to pirate the Mediterranean Sea, as well as a minor trading hub. By 66 CE, the Jews were fed up with the Roman rulers and would fight against them in what was known as a Great Jewish Revolt. But by 70 CE, the Temple and the city of Jerusalem as a whole would be destroyed yet again. Between this time and 135 CE, the Romans would absorb the Nabatean state, as well as fight three different conflicts with the Jews. The First Revolt, the Kiddus War, which was fought by Jews in diaspora, and the Bar Kokhba Revolt. This left very large numbers of Jews dead in what could be categorized as genocide, with many more moving out of Israel or being sold into slavery across the empire. In an attempt to suppress the identity of the Jewish people after the Bar Kokhba Revolt, Emperor Hadrian banned the Jews from Jerusalem and renamed the province of Judea into Syria Palestina, a Latin corruption of the Jews' old nemesis, the Philistines. From this point on, the term Palestine would almost exclusively be used to refer to this geographical region. At this point, I'd like to give a big thanks to Herodotus and Josephus, whose works preserve much of what we know about this little homeland in the ancient world. Over the next few centuries, Christianity would gain traction in the region, likely becoming the majority religion by the 5th century. At this point, the Roman Empire had been split, and Palestine found itself under the control of the Eastern Roman, or as later historians would call, the Byzantine Empire. They would hold on to it until the 7th century, when a new religion called Islam sprouted into existence in Arabia. Its followers, the Muslim Arabs, would conquer Palestine in 638 and much of North Africa and Iran by 650. Many Arabs began to settle the newly incorporated territory, giving way to the first major permanent Arab presence in the land. Under the caliphates, non-Muslims were legally obligated to pay a tax, or jizya. This, however, led to many non-Muslims converting to Islam. Arabic also started to become the predominant language around this time. Thus, with the religion, language, and people coming from Arabia, the region of Palestine began its process of Arabization. After the initial caliphates, the Islamic empires of the Ishkadids, Fatimids, and Seljuk Turks ruled before the launching of the First Crusade by Western European Christians. A Frank by the name of Godfrey of Bouillon would establish the Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1099, in which Europeans would make a significant minority, leaving a relatively small mark on the demographic history of the region. It had lasted until 1291, when the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt had finally pushed them out. With the last of the Christian rulers gone, Islam had now become the dominant religion across the entire region. For over 200 years, the Mamluks ruled Palestine, up until the Ottoman Empire absorbed their territories in 1517, giving way for this little homeland to be under another 400 years of Islamic influence. At this point, we have covered the origins of both the Jews and the Arabs in the land of Palestine. This will be of great benefit to understanding each side's claim to nationhood, as well as the origins of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as we push from the Ottoman era into the present day in Part 2.